with revenue. And so we're going to start off with the support and revenue expanded at page 3. And so let me take you through that.
Keith, if I can interrupt for a moment, I just wanted to let people know that we are recording this session. Thank you.
So I'll tell you that I'm a member of St. Philip's in Palatine, and I've been on the diocesan staff since 2007. The budget, a little bit of background on the budget. We started this budget off in April and worked on the diocesan staff worked on it through the summer. This was obviously before Bishop Paula started and was consecrated. So the staff was working on the budget through the summer. We brought this budget to our council on September 10th, and it was approved at the diocesan council, and then it was brought to the budget, the bishop and trustees, and approved in September also. There was concern expressed with the draw from bishop funds, and we're going to see that, we see that on this page. But basically this budget, it's a balanced budget because of that draw from bishop funds. And as the notes you've perhaps seen in the narrative, and also within the audit report, which is a report on our convention site, you'll see that there's a note that at a $1.3 million draw from bishop funds available to the bishop, available for the use for this type of use, that these monies will be depleted in 2026. So we're under the clock here. So let's start off at the top of that page. Pledges pledges for next year are $2,166,000. The actual at the end of 2021 was $2,199,000, and we're coming in right now for 2022 at a little bit less than $2,200,000. So the budget for 2023 is a little bit less than the 2022 actual that we're expecting. And we will start our pledge campaign off in December. There will be a letter from the bishop, from Bishop Paula, and we ask that pledges come in from then till the end of March. But as soon as possible, we'll make sure that we know if this budget is a realistic budget or not. Since 2008, 2007, 2008, the budget, the common mission share pledges were about $3.1 million. And so here we are, these years later, we're now down to $2.1 million. Back around that period, staffing was increased because the pledges were quite a bit more than they had been in the past. And so staffing was increased, and Bishop Lee brought in, reorganized the staff in 2011, assuming the assumption in that budget was that our budget would be around $3 million, $3.1 million. And in these years since, there's been one other reorganization of staff in 2016, and we've run deficits through the years, through the 2010s up until now, and have drawn down during that period right around $5.6 million to balance this budget. And so we're on the last, basically the last $4.5 million, and at 1.3 billion draw from that, that would deplete it, as I mentioned earlier, in 2026. So that's our best estimate, my best estimate, our best estimate on pledges, but we won't know the actual amount of pledges until March. Yeah, right around the end of March is when we wrap it up. The Bishop appeal, not much to talk about there. Excuse me. Let's see, going down the page, I don't know if there are any questions. Yes.
Yeah, just to pause, I see Alan James has his hand raised with a question.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, Alan.
Thank you.
What church, Alan? What church are you from, Alan?
I am a priest of the diocese, currently serving in the Diocese of Western Michigan on the bishop's staff there.
Okay.
But remain canonically resident here.
Okay.
What percent, I mean, the ask for mission share is 11 to 15%, I think. What percent do we actually receive?
It's in the low 7%. It's around 7. Last time I looked, it was 7.4. It's down a little bit less than that right now.
And has there been any conversation by council or staff members or B&T or anyone with those congregations that are particularly paying less than 10%, less than 7%, 0%, about why they're pledging that amount and the possibility of increasing?
Absolutely. That's a conversation that Courtney had quite regularly, and I believe Bishop Lee did too. I mean, there has been an effort to understand why, or if it was possible for people to increase their pledge. The response that we're getting is the response we're getting. The response that we're getting is that, can you close the, sorry. The response, I've got 3 teenagers in the house here. So the response that we're getting is that compensation is going up, insurance is going up, maintenance is going up, inflation is going up. And our churches are getting squeezed, and their parishioners are getting squeezed in terms of how much money they're making. Can you hold on just a second? Sorry about that. So that's the response.
All right, thank you.
So I think are there any questions on any of the other budget line items for revenue? These are all, miscellaneous income is mostly from a trust that we received in 2018. So that's that. And then the contribution from the endowment fund, that about 116,000 of that is a fund to support the episcopacy, and the balance is a gift from the trustees of the endowment fund to support the general operations of the diocese.
Keith, I see we've got another raised hand.
Yes.
Hi, Keith. This is Jeremy Froyen from St. John the Evangelist in Flossmoor.
Hi, James.
I just have a question. Sorry I didn't ask it a little earlier when you were actually talking about this, but I couldn't figure out how to get my hand up. But recognizing that, with our current budget and giving, that we're not going to be solvent in a few years. And I know that we're all facing the same things, right? But has there been any discussion anywhere about returning to a mandatory assessment? Not that any of us want to be on a mandatory assessment, but I think the work of the diocese is important. And has there been any discussion on how to fund this going forward? I know that most dioceses do mandatory assessments, and so I don't know the history of how we have the current system that we have now. So I'm just curious.
So the voluntary giving is from the early 90s, and the percentages have been the same since then. We were on an assessment before that, and what was happening is it was draining, it was closing congregations or forcing them to basically close, and I think that's been every time it certainly has been discussed since I've been on the staff, and I know before that. And to go back to an assessment, what we would do is just close more churches. There's already a number of churches in the diocese that are just on the edge. It would just precipitate their closing. So I think Bishop Lee, I don't know what Bishop Paul is going to decide to do, but Bishop Lee's feeling was that we were not going to go back and try. He did not want to be the bishop that was closing churches because of this. And so the plan here is that what you're going to see in the rest of the budget is basically in the expense segment of the budget. The last time we prepared a budget, again, it was based on staffing and programs reset in 2016. The last time we actually went into the programs and valued the expenditures, that was in 2019 for 2020. And of course, 2020, we closed down programs. And since then, we've not only kept programs closed down, except this year we have some open, and we'll see those in a moment. But so what's happening in the past couple of years is there really hasn't been, in 2021 and 2022, there will be no draw from the corpus in 2021 or 2022. So that's extended. It's extended the period in which we can draw going forward. So now I think it's going to be up to Bishop Paula. We may be selling, and you perhaps saw in the newsletter today or yesterday, I should say, that Bishop and Trustees is accepting bids for the sale of 65 East. Bishop Lee, when he left, said that, or as he was leaving, he said that the diocesan offices are really our endowment and will be our endowment. And that's the plan. That hopefully that'll be the plan to balance the budget going forward. We don't know if the $1.3 million is going to be spent next year. It's going to be up to how many staff we hire, how many programs we are able to bring back on. Although we are bringing, you'll see some revenue in here. But so should we go back to apportionment? I don't know. I would say we're probably not going to do that. And then there was a question, why is interest so low? That interest income is not from it's not from our investments. It's from our it's from our money market, which has about $40,000 in it right now. And when we were preparing this budget, rates were practically nil, practically zero. So it will probably realize more because rates are right now about at 2.5% on money market. So it'll be a little higher than that, but we don't have much money in a money market fund. Any other questions on revenue?
Keith, can you speak to the other parts of that question? Are there no funds to invest, and what is the return on the Bishop funds?
Well, the return on the Bishop funds are about 4%, 4.5%. And the Bishop funds, the corpus generates about $110,000. So the corpus of the Bishop funds generates about right now about $120,000. That's the sustainable part of that, those contributions. Was there another part to the question? So let's go. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's good. I think that answered. If there's, feel free to continue to use the chat or to raise your hand if you have additional questions about throughout the presentation.
Rebecca is our assistant treasurer, so she could probably give this presentation too. So, so let's go to the budget narrative.
Sorry, friends, just switching over.
Thank you, Rebecca.
There we go. Just make it a little bigger. Is that all right? Is there a piece of it, Keith, you want me to show?
Yeah, let's just go down the overview. I think this is an excellent overview. I won't read it to you, but let's just take a moment. Well, I will read this. In September 2022, Paula Clark was ordained and consecrated, and it ended 2 years in which we were without a diocesan bishop, and we were without really working on a programmatic budget with a program that the bishop wanted. So the 2023 bishop provides Bishop Clark the flexibility to determine sustainable staffing patterns. And so she understands this budget as well as anybody right now, and will be looking at staffing, looking at program priorities. And so when we come into the budget for 2024, and even through 2023, I expect that she will be judicious in terms of bringing on new staff and husbanding, so that if we need to spend the 1.3 million from Bishop funds, we will, but it's with an eye on not going out and trying to spend it all in next year. So it'll take some time to hire staff. It'll take some time to bring programs on, continue them, or for example, are we going to have the convention next year? The convention costs well over $100,000, and it takes 3 days and it takes a lot of staffing to support the convention, more staffing than we've got right now. So those are some of the decisions that will come up. Any questions on the overview? You can see the sustainable path forward, and you can see the creation of the endowment fund generated by the sale of 65 East. And I just mentioned we're accepting bids starting on December 6th. We've got a question. Let's see.
Keith, the question is, what is the source of the Bishop and Trustees revenue?
So the Bishop and Trustees have their own endowment investment, that was built up through the sale of property. And their income in that, they are on a similar, their disbursements versus their income based on their current endowment takes them out about 15 years. So the sale of 65 East will provide them with greater endowment to support their activities, which are basically support of mission congregations, closed property, and the diocesan, the 65 East. So, and they have staffing connected to that. So their income is from the diocesan foundation, just like the bishop funds income is from the diocesan foundation. Does that answer that question? So let's go to the.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So let's go to the episcopacy. Any questions about the narrative in the episcopacy? We're going to see the budget, the actual numbers in the budget, but this gives you the really most important part of the numbers behind this episcopacy budget. As I mentioned, there's over $100,000 of that support from trustees of the endowment fund that goes to support the episcopacy. This was a fund put together by Bishop Lee in his outward years, and it's very helpful for this budget. Let's move on to the next, I think, ministries. You can see that throughout this budget, costs are going up, driven by inflation. So there aren't many programmatic changes in here. It's inflation that's driving this. And I think, Anna, staffing compensation is going up 4.6%. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's based on what goes forward as the clergy compensation resolution. The diocesan staff follows that. And that's what's going forward, 4.6%.
Thank you. So that's ministries. Any questions about ministries or networking? So operations, the other part of this is operations, stop right here in operations in St. James Commons. Embedded in operations for the past several years was a lot of legal costs that was a huge drain on our budget, well over $1 million. I would expect it's closer to $1.5 million came through operations for legal costs. I just looked at that year to date, they're down to $70,000. So one of the reasons, and last year it was less, it was around $500,000. So legal costs ran through operations because Courtney was working with the litigation in Peoria, and that doesn't really come through this narrative, but that is kind of like one of the things that when I said we had almost $5.5 million come out of Bishop funds, about $1.5 million of that came out was because of legal costs. And it wasn't just Peoria, there was some other cost out of New York that defending against litigation, abuse litigation from the 50s before we had insurance. So that was another huge chunk of money that went out the door through operations. The other thing in operations in St. James Commons, you've got compensation regarding St. James Commons. We've always known, or I guess recently, we've got a building with about 40,000 square feet. Our staffing is using maybe maybe a quarter of that, maybe a third, maybe a fifth of that. And the rest of it is we're paying in carrying cost of St. James Commons over $400,000, and you'll see that probably closer to 500,000. Then you've got staff costs, which are carried up in operations. So you're going to see those costs. So if and when we can sell 65 East, that relieves the budget by about $500,000 is my estimate. So we'll see those numbers in just a little bit. Any questions on page 2 of the narrative?
Keith, I saw Alan James's hand.
Yes, Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that in fairness, 65 East is not just the diocesan offices. The cathedral uses it and pays $350,000 a year towards the running of it. So I think it's important to keep the whole picture about what happens there in front of the diocese.
So the cathedral has, and the number that I mentioned is net of their contribution. Their contribution right now to offset diocesan costs was $25,000 last year. It's going up to $75,000 this year. But the numbers that I'm talking about are net of their contribution. The ECCS, you'll see in a few minutes, 28,000 comes in to support the physical plant, but it's nowhere near the cost of St. James Commons. But you're correct. You're absolutely correct. They have a lot of activities and a lot of expense that are not in our budget that they expend for their activities and the staffing that they hire and incur relative to St. James Commons. So I don't know where the 350,000 came from, but it's not coming to us.
Well, it's you know, in disclosure, I'm married to the provost of the cathedral, so I've heard the 350,000 quoted. And my point also is to say that while you say that the diocese is using 25%, I wouldn't want that to be inferred that 75% of St. James is sitting empty, that there are other things that go on in the building beyond the diocesan use of it.
So we can move on.
I see Jane Clark has her hand raised.
Yes, Jane. Hi, Jane.
Jane, you're muted, so we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. I was thinking, assuming the diocesan building gets sold, what kind of costs have been anticipated for things like record storing, offices for personnel, place for the bishop? Where would all that kind of things happen, and what kind of costs would be involved in that?
So we haven't moved to that stage of the planning yet. We've been at this 2 years now from the time that Bishop Lee asked that we sell the property to where we are today. We don't expect we'll be out of there for some period of time. My estimate would be that our cost for facilities when we eventually move would be in the range of $100,000 a year, total. I mean, it could be more, could be less. But the cost of the move, we have our archives are already off-site. They cost about $30,000 a year for archives. And the cost of the move, I don't have an estimate, but I would expect it would be something in the order of $100,000 to move. but we need to find out where we're going to go. We need to put a group together and figure out where we're going to go and what we need and all that. And is there an interim step? Do we move once? Do we work remotely for a period of time as a staff? And so there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we probably need to start moving on those sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to page 3. So we've already talked about contributions. Any questions on any of this? You can see these are the details of what I mentioned on contributions. Income from congregations, income from bishop funds, income from the endowment. Let's page down a little more. And bishop and trustees, when they sell property, they share. They haven't done that. There hasn't been any income to share from the sale of property. This year, they sold one piece of property for about $50,000. But this hasn't been something that's been a source of income for the past couple of this year or the prior year. So we can keep going down. And income programs and other sources, and we have pass-through programs and pass-through income, and we mentioned some of those right there. So we basically pass that money on through. Some of them we do a little bit of the bookkeeping for them. And the Nicholas Center is closed. We don't have staffing, and we don't expect to have programs going next year. But you'll see some expenses in there, and that part of the building, things are breaking, things need repair. You'll see, I think, $15,000 or $20,000 of expense. That's what we have incurred, and that's what we expect to. We don't know what it's going to be, but we expect to incur it next year too. Any questions on, now we've covered revenue twice and the overview. So let's go to expenses now. And I think we'll just continue down this page and we can look at expenses, the expense narrative. There we go. So why don't we go to the detailed budget, Rebecca? Here we go. Here's the episcopacy. So these are the detail budgets. You can see the national church pledge has gone up, and that was because the PP loan, which was about $350,000, showed up in revenue in early 2021, and we're now paying our 15% apportionment on that this year. So that's the primary reason for the increase in the National Church Pledge. And we give them the full pledge. And let's see, there's no Lambeth Conference, there's no Search and Transition. Any questions on the episcopacy? Let's go to ministries, next one. This budget includes all staffing, the full staffing complement of positions in ministries, and you'll see in all these succeeding budgets, you'll see the 4.6% and positions that are currently vacant. They're budgeted in here. I think they're budgeted in at the full amount, Anna. Is that right? I can't remember for most of them.
Yes, they're budgeted for a 12-month period.
Yeah.
For 2023.
Yes. And this includes both compensation and benefits.
It does. And
Yeah.
Just a reminder that our health insurance went up by 5.7% for 2020.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So basically everything in here, the programs are, the full budget for these programs are in here. You can see the difference between what the 2021 actual is, the 2022 budget, and what we're anticipating in 2023 if all of these programs come into full force next year. It won't be near 304,000, it'll be at 592 or thereabouts with inflation. Any questions on any of these programs? Let's go to the next. This is networking, perhaps. Yeah. Networking. This includes, I think there's a development person in here. Is that correct, Anna?
Yes. Again, budgeted at 12 months. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions on networking? Let's go to operations. Let's go down in operations just a little bit more. Now go back just up a little bit. There's the, see the payroll audit, miscellaneous professional fee. That 552,000 is a lot of that is legal expense. The audit is nowhere near that. It's net is less than 20,000 for our audit, and payroll is about 10,000. So you can see the 552,000. The net for next year will be about $21,000 for payroll and audit. And this year I mentioned the professional fee, the legal part of that is about $70,000 this year. So it's down a lot. It should go to zero because we just finished another litigation just this week or last, I forget which. And you can see the convention is $104,000. In 2021, it was $6,200. And this year, it'll probably be about that same amount. Any questions on operations? Let's go to St. James Commons. And this is the $457,000 that I mentioned. I mentioned 400,000. We do get contributions from the cathedral and ECCS. And salaries are not in this number, so our expenses are well over $500,000. Any questions about St. James Commons? Any questions overall regarding the budget? I think that concludes our budget hearing for the diocesan budget for 2023. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance and your participation.
Keith, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't have a option to raise my hand. I don't know why not. But
Okay.
Is there a hard copy of this budget available?
We can. I can get you a PDF. Would that be okay?
Sure. Yeah.
So if you've got, you know my email address, or
It's
no.
also available on our diocesan website, which might be the easiest way. For those of you who can see the chat, a link, Jen has posted a link there.
Oh, but thank you.
If you can't see the chat, if you go to the diocesan website, which is episcopalchicago.org, and then the menu drop down, the first one you can find our diocesan convention webpage. And so 2022 diocesan convention, you'll find the narrative budget and the approved budget there, along with all sorts of other wonderful resources for our upcoming convention. So if you haven't visited that page, may I suggest that you do, but that's another place. If you can't see the chat, that's another place where you can find them. But you can always email Keith or email myself.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to send you copies.
Yeah, if you give me a call and I'll return your call, grab your email address and just send it to you.
Just from a philosophical standpoint, is there some reason that we keep kicking the can down the road rather than trying to come closer to balancing the budget? Because it looks like we've got kind of a disaster coming up in a few years. Wouldn't it be better to cut some expenses now?
Well, that's what's happened the past 2 years. Our staffing last year and this year, and the programmatic expenses have reduced the draw on bishop funds to zero. So it was forced on us by COVID, and it's continued into this year. So next year will be the Bishop Paula will be looking at exactly what you're saying. Will be, before she brings people on, she'll be evaluating, the need, the cost, the benefit, and try to reduce or eliminate the draw from bishop funds this next year. So I think we did what you're talking about. It was forced on us. We didn't plan this. So
Keith, is there an estimate on what kind of revenues would be generated from this properties?
From what? The
sale of properties.
Well, we don't have any bids yet. So yeah, there are estimates about what the value of the property are, but until you get a bid.
But what were those estimates?
Well, they ranged from, I think they were 40 million up.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you take 4% of 40 million, 4.5% of 40 million, that would be an estimate of what the endowment would produce. If that's the net value, there will be a sharing of that, those proceeds with the cathedral, and so the 40 million will not totally accrue to the diocese. A portion of that will go to the cathedral. So when all that math works out, we'll have a lot better position than we have today. but I can't tell you if it'll totally balance this budget. I can tell you that reducing our cost in the range of $400,000 or so will be a great help, because we'll take the burden of the current property off of our books and reduce it with something that's much more reasonably priced for the diocese. So we won't have to garner as much income as we would now if we stayed where we're at, but we can't stay where we're at because we need to sell it to create to increase our endowments. Any other questions? Well, thank you, everyone. I think we're done.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meg.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank
Say
you.
hi. Say hi to Lisa, Alan.
I will do that.
Anybody else? We'll see you.
Thank you, Keith and Rebecca and everyone.
Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Have a great evening.
Thank you.